Hey everybody, my name's East Coast Pete. This is Midrock Crisis. I'm here to give you some facts and some opinions about bands I've come across in my short 64 years. You've come a long way, baby. That sort of sexist, anti-sexism saying from commercials from the 60s refers pretty nicely to the fact that last week I did a show on Lemmy Kilmister. Today, I tried to think of a band as far away from Lemmy Kilmister as I could find. Came up with the United States of America's Kingston Trio. I was 5 or 6 when I remember my teenage sister playing a particular record on the family Magnavox. It had a red sleeve and 3 guys with acoustic guitars and crew cuts. The guitars had black pickguards and the young men were wholesome and collegiate. They were singing something about some guy hanging his head and crying. And I don't know why this appealed to me. Something about the mystery of life after public school, perhaps. Maybe it was the chiming harmonies. Maybe the camaraderie implied by their matching shirts. Maybe the red and black color scheme of the sleeve. My mom said Elvis was vulgar. Whatever that meant. But here were these guys doing basically the same thing, but my mom seemed okay with them. No one could have known that these 3 guys were the vanguard of the decade that would change just about everyone for just about everything. The group originated in San Francisco. Their advent coincided with the folk pop boom of the mid-50s. Dave Guard, Bob Shane, and Nick Reynolds were not exactly household names. They weren't singer-songwriters. That was not even a thing yet. They became popular singing traditional folk songs and spicing them up with Jamaican calypso. Their first single, Tom Dooley, written by a mountain man named Frank Prophet, sold 3 million copies, an unheard of figure for a debut album from any genre at that time, much less a folk singing group. They would go on to release 19 albums that reached the top 100, 14 of which were top 10 and 4 that made it to number 1. Back in the day, 2 friends in Honolulu started with ukuleles and switched to guitars. As high schoolers, they played Tahitian, Hawaiian, and calypso music at school shows and parties. Upon graduation, Dave Guard enrolled at Stanford and Bob Shane at nearby Menlo College, which is where he met Nick Reynolds. Nick's father had taught him guitar. He also learned to sing tenor harmonies during family sing-alongs. Shane brought Reynolds to meet Guard, and since they had similar musical tastes, they formed a trio to perform at frat houses and townie hangouts as Dave Guard and the Calypsonians. That's a cool name. The trio donned identical shirts with vertical stripes to get noticed. They rehearsed 8 hours a day for several months, continually adding traditional folk songs to their repertoire. They chanced to perform before a larger venue when they filled in for comedian Phyllis Diller, who had canceled a 2-week gig at the Purple Onion, a nightclub in Frisco. The boys sent out 500 postcards as invitations and plastered flyers all over town. The shows went well, drawing a crowd and pleased the club owners. The 2-week engagement stretched to 6 months. This kicked off a national tour with stops at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, the Village Vanguard in New York City, Storyville in Boston, and the Hungry Eye back in Frisco. Capitol signed them to a 7-year deal. Drinking songs, sea shanties, Appalachian, Jamaican, Mexican railroad songs, 49er mining songs, Dylan and Beatles covers, bongos a la beatnik, banjo leads, Reynolds baritone uke. Guitars are used first and foremost for rhythm. Chords are simple, harmonies are strong. This would be called skiffle if it were in the UK. Tom Dooley, he knifed a girl and was hung high, a serious subject made into a light-hearted romp. The wreck of the sloop John B., a calypso long before the Beach Boys version. Scotch and Soda, a Guard original takes a stab at jazz. Fast Freight, minor key with excellent harmony. MTA, their best-known song about raising the subway tolls. The trio became famous poking fun at Walter Mitty types. They were not to be confused with depth or honest protest. They weren't folk singers. They were folk songsters. All My Sorrows. Nice, but Mary Travers killed on this. Goober Peas. I find their banter about hillbillies in poor taste, and their Mexican jokes would be considered racist today. In '62, their Something Special album was nominated for a Grammy. The boys encountered criticism from the more traditional purist community. In '61, Guard decided he was the trio's leader, and he got pushy. Ego is the band killer, and Guard was ousted and brought out for $300,000. John Stewart replaced him almost immediately. Not that John Stewart. In '64, sales began to wane. Many reasons were given, such as competition from Peter, Paul, and Mary's popularity and more political stance, but of course the Brit invasion, which I like to call the Brit invitation, erased so many American acts. There is more to it. Of course, the trio in any different guise could not, would not change. In 1967, they were done. Stewart continued to write for other acts. He wrote Daydream Believer for the Monkees. He thought that was Neil Diamond? Yeah, so did I. Guard and Shane continued feuding through reunions and more breakups. There have been several attempts to take the name further, but it just wasn't cool anymore. Guard died of cancer in 1991. Shane sold the band's future royalties to an investment group. Reynolds retired in '99. His son Josh tried to keep the torch burning, but could not hope for any success beyond nostalgia. Perhaps that's their legacy. They remind us of a simpler time. And that's a cliche, but that's what music like theirs has always been for. Promoting a trio as a single unit, as opposed to focus on a single face, was not a new thing. The Weavers with Pete Seeger had already shown that a socialistic approach could work. The Kingston Trio is 3 guys, though. This would introduce a format that opened the door for boy bands like the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, and all the rest who came after. Remember, these rock gods did not become successful all on their own. There was a music industry behind them, recording and promoting them. Execs first had to see a pattern of success with a group like the Kingston Trio to be certain of a return on their investment. And without the execs, the Beatles would have disintegrated in Hamburg. The Stones would have become art school dropouts, and The Who would have never become darlings of the mods. The Teddy Boys would have blocked the path. In the US, music would have continued to be segregated. Elvis wouldn't have been exposed to soul and R&B, and Chuck Berry and Little Richard would not have crossed over on the airwaves. Country music would have stayed in the country, and city music would have stayed in the city. The record companies saw a buck to be made, and they made it. Thanks everyone for being here. Really want you to subscribe to my channel. I promise in the future to bring you very interesting anecdotes about music. And if you hit like, it would help me a great deal. Thanks everyone. See you soon.